The morning light spilled across the white ceiling, a gentle dawn after the whirlwind of the previous day. Samara stretched, a soft smile touching her lips as she turned her head. There, sleeping soundly with one arm flung wide, was Jovon, her husband. The words still felt foreign, a new and wonderful weight on her tongue, warming her from the inside out. Yesterday had been perfect, their day. Slipping quietly from beneath the quilt, she shrugged on a silk robe and padded to the kitchen. The click of the electric kettle was a familiar, comforting sound. She retrieved the remains of the wedding cake from the refrigerator, 3 elegant tiers adorned with cream roses that had earned endless praise, set a piece on a plate, and sat at the table. As she broke off a piece of the delicate sponge, she let her eyes close, allowing the memories of the evening to wash over her like a cherished film. The Velvet Garden had been the ideal choice. It was a cozy, family-owned restaurant with an intimate courtyard, just about 20 tables. They had searched for a spot that felt personal and unpretentious, and this had been it. Their guest list, around 40 people, included only their closest circles: parents, a handful of friends, Samara's colleagues from Lincoln Elementary, Jovon's buddies from the auto shop where he worked as a master mechanic, and her bridesmaids, Tanisha, Ebony, and Lanice. She could still feel the solid, reassuring presence of her father as he walked her down the makeshift aisle between the rows of chairs. Pops had worn a sharp new suit, his eyes glistening as he fought back tears. "You look so beautiful, baby girl," he had whispered when they paused beneath the archway, lush with white roses and trailing greenery. Then she had seen Jovon, waiting for her at the end. The way he looked at her stole her breath, as if he were seeing her for the first time, his eyes shining, a tender, trembling smile on his lips. Tall and broad-shouldered in his deep blue suit, he seemed like a prince from a storybook. They had met only 6 months ago, a memory that now made her smile. It was in a downtown bookstore. Samara had been browsing curriculum guides for her 3rd grade class, while Jovon was leafing through automotive magazines. She'd reached for a book on a high shelf, her elbow accidentally bumping his arm. "Excuse me," she'd muttered, flushing. "You're good," he'd laughed, a warm, easy sound. "Let me get that for you before you bring the whole stack down on yourself." He retrieved the book, handed it to her, and then asked, "You a teacher, right? How did you guess?" "By the look. My homeroom teacher had that same strict but kind look." They had talked right there among the shelves. He walked her to her car, asked for her number, and called that same evening. Just like that, it began. Dates, long walks through the city at night, shared dinners. Jovon was attentiveness personified. He asked about her day, brought coffee to the school during the stressful week of state testing, and made her feel seen. A month into their whirlwind romance, he had said, "I'm serious about this. I want you to be my wife." Samara laughed in surprise. "We barely know each other." "So we'll get to know each other," he'd answered, utterly earnest. "But I already know you're the one. Maybe it's fast, but I feel it." Her mother had been wary. "Samara, baby, are you sure? 6 months is such a short time." But Samara had felt a deep, unshakable certainty. With Jovon, everything was easy, calm, and secure. There were no games, no hidden agendas, just a straightforward, grown-up honesty that she cherished. He proposed 4 months in, at a park by a bubbling fountain, no grand spectacle, just the 2 of them, a simple ring with a small stone, and his sincere words, "Marry me. I promise to make you happy." Taking a sip of tea now, she looked at the wedding band on her finger. It was a thin band of gold, inscribed inside with the words, "Samara plus Jovon forever." He had a matching one. They had chosen them together at a small jeweler's workshop, playfully bickering and laughing as they tried on different styles, before ultimately settling on the simplest design. "No diamonds, no filigree," Jovon said, taking her hand. "The main thing is that they're ours." Yesterday, during their first dance as husband and wife, a slow R&B ballad filling the air, he had held her close, his hand firm on his waist, and whispered in his ear, "Thank you for being here. I'm the happiest man on earth." In that moment, with the guests smiling around them and someone's phone capturing the scene, the rest of the world had simply faded away. It felt as though they were the only two people in the entire universe. Later, dancing with her father, Samara had felt the poignant shift in her world. Pops shifted awkwardly from foot to foot, never been much of a dancer. "Sorry, baby, for stepping on your toes," he'd muttered. "Pops, it's all good," she soothed, hugging his shoulders. He was shorter than Jovon, and she had to lean down a little. "You're a married woman now," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Take care of yourself. If anything happens, you know where Mama and I are. Always." Samara could only have nodded, a lump of emotion tightening her throat. It was a final dance, a silent passing of the torch from her childhood into this new chapter. The celebration had lasted well into the night. Line dances, heartfelt toasts, and spontaneous songs. Throughout, Jovon had held her hand, occasionally pressing a kiss to her temple. His friends regaled the table with outrageous tales from the garage. Her colleagues shared amusing school stories, and Lanice, ever the vibrant center of attention, flitted around the party. Tall, light-skinned, and possessing a knack for wearing dresses that turned heads, Lanice had been a friend since college, though she had never felt a profound closeness to her. Lanice thrived on being noticed, on catching admiring glances and engaging in playful flirtation. She remembered a moment when Lanice had thrown an arm around Jovon, laughing loudly at something he said. "Good job finding our Samara. Take care of her, she's gold." Jovon had simply smiled and nodded. At the time, it seemed like harmless, friendly banter, just Lanice being Lanice with her effusive hugs and kisses. It was simply her character. The apartment they now shared was Samara's, a two-bedroom in a quiet, pleasant neighborhood on the fourth floor of a sturdy brick building. It had been a gift from her grandmother 3 years prior. Grandma, a meticulous accountant who had saved diligently her whole life, had purchased the apartment decades earlier, when prices were modest, and signed it over to her only granddaughter before she passed. "Let you have your own little nest, baby. Don't sell it, baby. Keep it." Samara had never considered selling. She'd done some light renovation, hanging cheerful wallpaper, updating the living room furniture, installing new kitchen cabinets, transforming it into a space that felt truly warm and inviting. When Jovon first visited, he'd immediately remarked, "It feels warm here, like real warm." He had been renting a small studio on the outskirts of town, saving for a place of his own, though a mechanic's salary made that a slow process. Once they were engaged, the housing question resolved itself naturally. "Move in with me," Samara had offered. "Why should you pay rent when we have a place to live?" Jovon had agreed without hesitation. As a second-year, third-grade teacher, Samara's salary was modest but stable. The lack of a mortgage or rent, thanks to her grandmother's foresight, meant they could build a comfortable life without financial strain. Samara had never craved a luxury. Her happiness was found in simple pleasures, a good book, Sunday strolls, shared meals. The sound of footsteps behind her pulled her from her reverie. Jovon emerged from the bedroom, his hair delightfully disheveled, wearing just boxers and a tank top. He yawned, stretched, and scratched the back of his head. "Good morning, wifey," he said, that familiar smirk playing on his lips as he leaned down to kiss the top of her head. "Good morning, husband," she replied, feeling a smile bloom across her face. "You want tea?" "Yeah." "Why are you up so early? You could have slept more." "Couldn't. Too many emotions." He sat opposite her, snagged a piece of cake with his fingers, and took a hearty bite. "Yesterday was dope, right?" he said around the mouthful. "All the guests left happy. Mr. Sterling from the restaurant even said we had one of the most fun weddings." "Yeah, it was great," Samara agreed. "Everyone tried their best, had fun, even Pops danced." "Your dad's all right. He's a good man. I'm glad he accepted me." "He accepted you right away. He said you were solid." Jovon chuckled, finished his tea in a few gulps, and stood. "All right, I'm gonna hit the shower. Then I gotta run somewhere, swing by the shop. The boss called, said an urgent job came in. You don't mind?" "No, of course not. Go ahead." He disappeared into the bathroom, leaving Samara alone in the sudden quiet of the kitchen. The only sounds were the hum of the refrigerator and the distant murmur of traffic. She glanced at her phone on the table. It was 5 minutes to 11. It felt strange that no one had called yet. Usually, after such events, friends and family would be ringing first thing to share impressions and well wishes. As if on cue, the phone screen lit up. An unknown number. She frowned, picking up. Hello? Hello, Mrs. Samara Hayes. A male voice, polite but formal. Yes, this is she. Who is this? This is Otis Sterling, the manager of the Velvet Garden. We hosted your wedding yesterday. Oh, hello, Samara said, her tone brightening. Thank you again. Everything was organized wonderfully. Don't mention it, but I'm not calling about that. The manager's voice grew serious, laced with a tension that immediately put her on edge. Mrs. Hayes, I have a very delicate question for you. Yes? Samara sat up straighter. Did something happen? You see, we were double-checking the security camera footage this morning. We had a small issue with the system beforehand, so the tech came to check if everything was okay, and he stumbled upon something. In short, we discovered something on the recording. It concerns your event. The recording? Samara asked, confusion clouding her thoughts. What do you mean, Mr. Sterling? I can't talk about this over the phone. You need to see this in person. Believe me, I wouldn't disturb you if it wasn't important. Samara's heart began to drum a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Dozens of alarming possibilities flashed through her mind. A theft, a fight among guests. But the evening had been so peaceful. Everyone had left in good spirits. Okay, she spoke slowly, choosing her words with care. I can come by. When? The sooner the better. I'll be here all day. And one more thing, Mrs. Hayes. He paused, and the silence stretched, heavy with implication. Please come alone. Don't say anything to your husband. This is important. What? Samara half rose from her chair. Why? What is on that recording? Come, you'll see everything yourself. I'll be waiting in the office. Just trust me, you need to see this yourself first. He said goodbye and hung up before she could form another question. Samara froze, the phone clutched in her hand, staring blankly at the wall. A cold, unsettling anxiety pooled in her stomach. What kind of conversation was that? Why the secrecy? The sound of running water echoed from the bathroom. Jovon was in the shower. She swallowed, her mouth suddenly dry. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the manager had mixed up events. But his tone was so grave, so unmistakably alarmed. People didn't speak that way without cause. She replayed the previous evening in her mind, scrutinizing every moment. Everything had been good, hadn't it? Jovon was by her side. They danced, laughed, accepted congratulations. Lenise had indulged a little too much, flirting as usual, but that was just her way. Samara hadn't noticed anything amiss. Or had she? She frowned, remembering a stretch where she had danced with her father for a good 10 minutes. Jovon had stepped away somewhere during that time. When he returned, he'd mentioned stepping out to take a work call. It hadn't seemed suspicious then. Her thoughts began to spiral. She stood, paced the length of the kitchen, and sat back down, her legs feeling unsteady. She had to go. The not knowing would drive her mad. When Jovon emerged from the shower, fresh and cheerful with damp hair, she forced normalcy into her voice. Listen, I'm going to get dressed quick and head to the shop. I'll be back to lunch. We can eat together. Okay, Samara nodded, keeping her tone light. I'll probably go to my friend's too, Tanisha's. She forgot her purse at our place yesterday. The lie tasted bitter, but she couldn't tell the truth. How would that sound? The restaurant manager called and ordered me to come urgently to watch some tape, but without you? It was unthinkable. Okay, Jovon said, pecking her cheek before heading to get dressed. 20 minutes later, he was gone. Alone again, Samara sank on the sofa, wrapping her arms tightly around her knees. The anxiety was a living thing now, coiling and tightening with each passing minute. What if there was truly bad on that tape? She refused to let her mind complete the thought. Dressing quickly in jeans and a sweater, she grabbed her purse and keys, her hands trembling as she pressed the elevator button. Every instinct screamed for her to turn back, to avoid whatever awaited her, but a stronger pull, a mix of dread and desperate curiosity, propelled her forward. The restaurant was a 20-minute drive.
The journey felt interminable. She turned on the radio only to snap it off again, the cheerful music a jarring contrast to her inner turmoil. The pressing silence was preferable. Pulling into the empty parking lot of the Velvet Garden, she saw the main door was slightly ajar. Inside, the hall was transformed from the festive space of yesterday. The flowers and ribbons were gone. Bare tables stood with chairs upturned on them, waiting for the floor to be mopped. "Mrs. Hayes?" Otis Sterling appeared from behind the bar, a man in his 50s with glasses and a neatly trimmed beard. He looked weary, as if he hadn't slept. "Hello," Samara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm here. What did you want to show me?" He nodded somberly toward a service corridor. "Let's go. Better you sit down before watching." He led her past the kitchen and utility rooms, the air smelling of cleaning supplies and damp concrete, to a small, cluttered office at the end of the hall. An old desk, 2 chairs, a dated calendar on the wall. A laptop sat open on the desk. "Sit down, please," he gestured. He remained standing, arms crossed. "Mrs. Hayes, I want to say right away I feel very awkward about all this. I thought maybe I shouldn't show you, just forget it. But then I decided you need to know the truth. Better now than later when it will be even worse." "You're scaring me," Samara whispered, her fists clenched in her lap. "What is on the recording?" He sighed deeply, pulling the laptop closer and taking the mouse. "We have security cameras in the restaurant, 3 in the main hall for safety, but there is 1 more camera in the supply room where we keep inventory, dishes, and stock. We installed it after some expensive equipment was stolen 2 years ago. The camera is in the corner, hardly noticeable. Guests don't go there. But yesterday, someone did. Anyway, see for yourself." He clicked the mouse. A grainy black and white video filled the screen. The angle was from above, showing a small, cluttered room, metal shelves laden with boxes, stacks of plates, pots. In one corner, mops and buckets. Against a wall, an old sofa, likely for staff breaks. The timestamp read 9:43 p.m. Samara remembered that time. She had been dancing with her father. On the screen, the supply room door opened. A woman walked in. Tall, with light hair spilling over her shoulders, wearing a tight red dress. Samara's breath hitched. "Lenise!" Her bridesmaid glanced over her shoulder, then stepped fully inside. A second later, a man appeared in the doorway. Broad shoulders, a dork suit, a walk she knew intimately. Jovon. Samara froze, her lungs seizing. She stared, unblinking, as her world contracted to the cold, hard reality of the pixels before her. On the recording, Jovon closed the door. Lenise turned to him, her lips moving soundlessly. He stepped closer. She placed her hands on his chest. He pulled her into his arms, and then they were kissing. Not a polite peck, not a friendly gesture. It was a long, deep, passionate kiss, full of a hungry familiarity. Lenise's fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer. Jovon pressed her against the shelving, his hands sliding down to her hips. It was the kiss of lovers who had wanted this for a long time. Samara couldn't look away. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. But the image was undeniable. Her husband, who had sworn eternal loyalty just hours before, was entangled with another woman, and not just any woman, her friend. On the screen, they broke apart. Jovon said something, a smirk playing on his lips. Lenise laughed, throwing her head back. They moved to the sofa, sitting close. Lenise produced cigarettes from her purse, offering him one. They lit up, talking animatedly. "I'm turning on the sound now," Mr. Sterling said quietly. "The camera records audio, too. The tech synced it." He adjusted the volume. The voices that spilled from the laptop speakers were clear, chillingly intimate. "Thought I wasn't going to make it," Lenise was saying, taking a drag. "Watching you dance with her all night, kissing her. Damn, Jovon, my nerves almost snapped." "Come on now," Jovon's voice, so familiar, so casually cruel. "Just hold on a little longer. Everything is going according to plan." "According to plan?" Lenise scoffed. "And what about me? When she whispers to me, Thank you for being here, bestie. It makes me want to throw up. Don't throw up, he chuckled. You're an actress. Played it perfectly. Maid of honor, indeed. Lenice grimaced. Listen, how much longer do we have to play this comedy? When are you finally going to divorce her? The words landed like physical blows. Samara felt the ground fall away beneath her. She sat rigid, her fingers digging into the edge of the desk as the conversation continued to dismantle her life. Don't rush, Jovon said. We gotta do everything smart. First, she puts my name on the deed, then we wait 3 or 4 months so there's no suspicion, and then we can divorce. The condo stays with me, and you and I will live it up like we wanted. What if she doesn't sign it over? Lenice asked. She will, Jovon replied, his tone dripping with condescending confidence. I already started working on her, telling her let's put everything in both our names so I feel like the real head of the household. She thinks it's about equality in marriage. Gullible fool. Give it 2 weeks and she'll run to the county clerk herself. Lenice's laugh was a ringing, cynical sound. Damn, you're a genius. Seriously? Making a teacher fall in love with you turned out to be easier than easy. Well, why not? Jovon shrugged on the screen. She was lonely, no man, works at the school for pennies, lives a boring life. Here I come, good-looking, attentive, giving flowers, compliments. She fell right into my hands. True enough, Lenice said, stubbing her cigarette out on the floor. And I thought at first you really fell for her. When you told me you were marrying her, I was like, what the hell? Oh, drop it, Lenice. Jovon pulled her closer, kissing her neck. You know I love only you. Samara is just a way to solve our housing problems. She has a condo downtown, 2 bedrooms, paid off. We sell it, buy ourselves something nice, and live off the rest. What if she smells a rat? Lenice asked, a hint of caution in her voice. Nah, she won't. She's naive, believes every word. Yesterday, I told her I want kids with her. She almost cried from happiness. He smirked. Kids? Damn, having kids with her? That's a nightmare. She's such a bore. Exactly, Lenice chimed in. I remember in college she was always such a goody two-shoes. Homework on time, passed exams first, didn't go to parties, snooze fest. But she has a good apartment. And that's the main thing, Jovon concluded. They fell into a brief silence. Then Lenice turned to him, her hand on his knee. Listen, can we meet normally later, without all this hiding? Of course. As soon as I file for the divorce, we move in immediately. Maybe even get married if you want. I want to, she smiled. I've wanted to be your wife for a long time. A real one, not like that dummy sitting out there in the hall, rejoicing that she got married.
Jovon laughed, hugging her. They kissed again, long and greedy. Samara watched, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Something vital inside her was tearing apart, leaving a cold, hollow ache. The recording continued for another minute, Lenice leaving, Jovon lingering for a final cigarette, checking his phone, fixing his tie before exiting. But Samara had seen and heard enough. Mr. Sterling pressed pause. The ensuing silence in the small office was deafening. I am very sorry, the manager said, his voice thick with sympathy. I know this is terrible, but I thought you had to see this. Otherwise, this person would continue to deceive you. Samara was beyond words. The sheer scale of the betrayal was paralyzing. Jovon had never loved her. It was all a performance, a calculated scheme from the very first meeting in the bookstore. The dates, the proposal, the wedding, all an elaborate act to get her apartment. And Lenice, someone she had called a friend, had been a willing accomplice, laughing at her naivety, plotting her humiliation. Mrs. Hayes, Mr. Sterling said gently, handing her a glass of water he had poured, can I get you anything? She took the glass with trembling hands, the cold water a shock to her system. How long is this recording? About 7 minutes. I showed you everything. Can I save it for my phone? Of course, I have a flash drive. I'll copy it right now. As he transferred the file, Samara sat in a daze, but slowly, through the numbness, a new sensation began to crystallize.
It wasn't just pain or grief, it was anger, a pure, white-hot rage. They had thought her a fool, a quiet, boring teacher too trusting to see through their lies. They planned to use her and discard her without a second thought. But they had miscalculated. She clenched her fists, the tears on her cheeks beginning to dry. In their place grew a cold, hard resolve. "Here, it's ready," Mr. Sterling said, handing her the small flash drive. "The recording is on it. If you need anything else, just ask. I'm ready to help." Samara took it, the plastic casing cool in her palm. "Thank you," she said, meeting his eyes. "Thank you for showing me the truth." "Don't mention it. I couldn't stay silent. I have a daughter myself. If that happened to her, I would want someone to tell her." Leaving the restaurant, she got into her car but didn't drive. She just sat, staring through the windshield, the flash drive a tiny, weighty object on the passenger seat. It contained the proof that her last 6 months were a fiction. She didn't want to go home. The thought of facing Jovon, of pretending, was unbearable. Instead, she drove aimlessly through the city, the familiar streets blurring past. Eventually, she stopped at a small, deserted park. The wind was cold, whipping through the bare branches. She sat on a bench, the flash drive gripped tightly in her hand. She could run, she could pack her things, go to her parents, file for divorce, and try to forget. But the idea of letting them walk away unscathed, of allowing them to think they had gotten away with it, felt like a second, deeper betrayal of herself. They wanted to humiliate her, to steal her home, the legacy from her grandmother. No, that would not happen. Taking out her phone, she first called her father. "Samara?" Pops's voice was instantly alert. "Why aren't you home?" "Pops," her voice wavered, but she steadied it. "I need your help. Can I come over right now?" "Of course, baby girl, come over. Did something happen?" "I'll tell you when I see you." Next, she called Tanisha, her most trusted friend. "T, it's me. You free right now? I need to talk to you urgently." "Samara, what's wrong? Your voice sounds weird. Is everything okay?" "No, not okay. I'm heading to my parents' right now. Can you meet me there?" "Of course. I'm walking out the door." "Samara, what happened?" "You'll find out soon. Just get ready. It's bad news." At her parents' apartment, her mother was waiting by the entrance, wrapped in a housecoat against the chill. "Samara, baby, what happened?" Mama rushed forward, pulling her into a hug. Pop stood grim-faced in the kitchen doorway. Once inside, with Tanisha arriving soon after, Samara placed the flash drive on the table. "There's a recording here from the restaurant security camera. You all need to watch this." Pop brought out a laptop. As the footage played, the reactions were visceral. Her mother's gasp, Tanisha's hissed curse, her father's face turning to stone, his fists clenching. The awful conversation played out, laying bare the cruel plot. When it ended, the kitchen was thick with a stunned, furious silence. "I will kill him," Pop said, the words quiet and deadly. "Pops, don't," Samara said, placing a hand on his arm. "Don't ruin your life over him. He's not worth it." "How dare he?" her father seethed. "I trusted him. I shook his hand, called him son-in-law." Tanisha stood, pacing. "Samara, what are you going to do? Go back and tell him everything to his face?" Samara shook her head slowly. "If I go back now, he'll deny it, or he'll confess and cry and beg, and he'll find the words to confuse me. I know men like that. I want him to understand what it's like to be humiliated. I want him to feel what I felt today." She looked at each of them, her gaze steady. "I want revenge." Tanisha sat back down, taking her hand. "You want revenge?" "Yes," Samara said, the words solid and sure. "They laughed at me. They made plans on how to deceive me, take my home, and toss me out. They thought I was an idiot who wouldn't catch on. They want to regret it." Her mother was worried. "Samara, baby, I understand you're hurting, but revenge? Mama, he stole 6 months of my life. He stole my faith in people. He wanted to steal the only thing I have left from Grandma. I can't just walk away." "She's right," Pop said, his voice firm. "Let that scumbag get what deserves him." Tanisha nodded after a moment. "Okay, if you've decided, I'm with you. What's the plan?" Samara laid it out. She would organize a second-day party at the same restaurant, inviting all the wedding guests under the guise of continuing the celebration. She would arrange for a projector and screen. When everyone was gathered, relaxed and unsuspecting, she would play the security footage for all to see. Let Jovon and Lanice be exposed in front of the very people they had tried to deceive. Let them face the collective judgment and shame. Pop and Tanisha immediately pledged their help. Mama, though apprehensive, saw the fire in her daughter's eyes and did not object. They spent the next hour working out details, contacting guests, coordinating with Mr. Sterling, who agreed without hesitation to host the event and provide the AV equipment. The next 2 days were an exercise in painful pretense. Samara played the part of the blissful newlywed, smiling at Jovon over breakfast, asking about his day, cooking dinner.
He noticed nothing, his arrogance and certainty and her gullibility complete. When he briefly suggested canceling the party, her heart leapt into her throat, but she calmly insisted it was all arranged and paid for. He relented with a shrug. On Saturday morning, she visited the restaurant to finalize arrangements. Mr. Sterling had everything prepared. Table set, buffet ready, projector and large screen positioned in the center of the hall. They tested the flash drive. Seeing that frozen image of the kiss on the big screen was a fresh wound, but it also hardened her resolve. That evening, she wore her wedding dress again. Jovon was puzzled. Why the same one? "I want everything to be like that evening," she answered simply, fastening her earrings. "It's beautiful." They arrived to find guests already mingling. The atmosphere was cheerful, a festive echo of the wedding. Lanice arrived, resplendent in a tight black dress, air-kissing Samara's cheek. "Hey, girl, you really did it! Second-day party, go ahead." "Glad you came, Lanice," Samara said, her smile perfectly placid. She watched as Lanice took a seat near Jovon, whispering in his ear, laughing. The sight made her stomach churn, but she held her composure. By 7:30, everyone was present. The hall buzzed with conversation and laughter. Jovon held court, telling a story that had his friends roaring. Samara caught Mr. Sterling's eye by the bar and gave a small, firm nod. It was time. She walked to the center of the room, near the blank screen, and raised a hand. The chatter gradually subsided. "Dear friends," she began, her voice clear and carrying, "thank you for coming today. Thank you for sharing our joy on the day Jovon and I got married. It was a special evening." She paused, taking in the smiling, expectant faces. "I want to show you something, a video from our wedding." Otis Sterling, the restaurant manager, was double-checking the security camera footage and discovered one moment that I think everyone should see. A ripple of curiosity passed through the crowd. Jovon's smile faded. Lanice froze, her wine glass halfway to her lips. Samara nodded to Mr. Sterling. The screen illuminated. The grainy black and white footage of the supply room filled the space. Gasps erupted as Lanice entered, followed by Jovon. The kiss played out in terrible, silent clarity. Jovon shot to his feet. "Samara, what is this? Turn it off immediately." But Samara stood immovable, her eyes fixed on the screen. Then the sound came on. The damning conversation echoed through the now silent hall. Lanice's voice. "Thought I wasn't going to make it. Watching you dance with her all night, kissing her. Damn, Jovon, my nerves almost snapped." Jovon's voice. So familiar, so coldly calculating. "Don't rush. First, she puts my name on the deed, the condo stays with me, and you and I will live it up like we wanted." The words "gullible fool" and "she fell right into my hands" hung in the air, toxic and undeniable. The reaction was instantaneous and brutal. Jovon's mother cried out, burying her face in her hands. His father, Elijah, stood up, his face purpling with rage and shame. Guests stared in horrified disbelief, then turned their stares on Jovon and Lanice. Jovon tried to reach the projector, but Samara's father and Tanisha blocked his path. "Stop right there, son-in-law," Pop said, the title a venomous sneer. "Watch it to the end." On screen, the conversation spiraled to its cruel conclusion. The plans for divorce, the mocking of Samara, the declaration of love between the conspirators. When the screen finally went dark, the silence was absolute.
heavy with collective shock. Samara walked slowly to the table where Jovon stood, pale and shattered. She took off her wedding band and placed it on the table in front of him with a soft, final click. "Here's your ring, Jovon. You aren't my husband anymore. I'm filing for divorce on Monday. You won't get the condo. You won't get anything except disgrace." He stammered, reaching for her. "Samara, wait! It's not what you think." She snatched her hand back. "Don't you dare touch me. Get out of my apartment today. If your things aren't gone in an hour, I'm throwing them in the trash." She turned her gaze to Lanice, who was trying to flee. "And you laughed at me behind my back. You thought I was an idiot. Now everyone knows who you really are." Lanice, under the weight of dozens of contemptuous stares, gathered her purse and fled the hall without a back glance. Jovon stood isolated in the center of the room, exposed and broken. His father stormed over, grabbing him by the shoulder. "Pack your things, move out of Samara's apartment, and never show your face in front of her again. You hear me?" Under the combined weight of his father's fury, his mother's tears, and the disgust of everyone he knew, Jovon could only nod mutely before slinking out of the restaurant, the door closing on the life he had tried to steal. In the aftermath, guests approached Samara one by one, with hugs, tears, apologies from his friends who felt betrayed themselves, and overwhelming support. The vice principal from her school took her hand. "Samara, you are a real hero. You showed everyone not to mess with you." When the hall finally emptied, leaving only her family, Tanisha and Mr. Sterling, Samara felt the immense tension of the past days drain away, leaving her exhausted, but clean, like a storm had passed. They returned to her apartment to find Jovon's belongings gone. The space felt different, hers again, wholly and completely. The legal divorce was swift and uncontested. The apartment, always in her name, remained hers. The months that followed were a time of slow, deliberate healing. She threw herself into her work, the innocent, demanding love of her third graders a balm to her spirit. She spent time with her true friends and her family. The scar of the betrayal remained, a permanent lesson etched on her heart, but the sharp, debilitating pain gradually receded. One evening, months later, sitting in her kitchen with Tanisha and a colleague, the conversation turned to that day. "I respect you so much for what you did. Not every woman would dare." Samara smiled, a genuine, peaceful expression. "I just didn't want to stay silent." She looked out the window at the falling snow, the world quiet and waiting for spring. "You know the strangest thing?" she said softly. "I'm grateful to him." Tanisha looked startled. "To who? Jovon?" "Yes. Grateful that he showed me the truth, that he taught me not to be naive, that he forced me to become stronger. If not for this story, I would have remained a quiet teacher who was afraid to stand up for herself. And now I know that I can handle anything." She felt, for the first time in a long time, truly free. Free from lies, from manipulation, from the shadow of a person who had seen her only as a means to an end. She was alone, but the solitude was honest and unburdened. The future was an open road, and she was ready to walk it, wiser, more cautious, and infinitely stronger for the journey she had survived. The greatest lesson was not about the depths of someone else's deceit, but about the hidden reservoirs of her own strength. She had faced the twist of fate, and she had not broken.
She had remade herself in its aftermath. The crisp March air held the last bite of winter, but the weak afternoon sun streaming through Samara's kitchen window promised softer days ahead. The remains of a peach cobbler sat between them, forks abandoned as tea cooled in their mugs. Tanisha's question still hung in the comfortable silence. Grateful to him? Samara turned her gaze from the swirling snow flurries outside back to her friends. Mrs. Hollingsworth, the vice principal, watched her with a gentle, knowing look. "It sounds like forgiveness," the older woman observed, not unkindly. "Not forgiveness," Samara clarified, tracing the rim of her mug. "Not for him, or for Lanice. That's a bridge too far, maybe forever. It's more an acknowledgement. He was the catalyst for a change I didn't know I needed. I was sleepwalking through a script, the good daughter, the dedicated teacher, the woman waiting for a man to give her life its happily ever after chapter.
He didn't just betray me, he ripped up that entire script. And in that terrifying blank space, I had to write my own. Tanisha reached over and squeezed her hand. You wrote a hell of a first draft. The months following the explosive restaurant revelation had been a masterclass in quiet reconstruction. The divorce was finalized with stunning rapidity, a straightforward dissolution since there were no shared assets to contest. Jovon, his reputation in tatters among his family and friends, offered no resistance. Samara heard through the fragmented grapevine, mostly from Marcus, a mechanic from the shop who still felt guilty, that Jovon had moved to a city a few hours away. Lenice, she learned from a mutual acquaintance who wasn't so mutual anymore, had also left town, the weight of local scorn apparently too heavy to bear. Samara didn't dwell on their fates. They had become footnotes in her own story. Her energy was spent on reclamation. She repainted the bedroom, choosing a soft, serene seafoam green to overwrite the memory of shared mornings. She donated the few pieces of furniture Jovon had brought with him and rearranged the living room until it felt entirely, uniquely hers. She took a weekend pottery class on a whim, her hands learning to shape something new from formless clay. It was messy and imperfect, and she loved every lopsided bowl. Professionally, a newfound steel entered her demeanor. She had always been a passionate teacher, but now she advocated for her students and herself with a quiet, unshakable confidence that made the school administration sit up and take notice. When a problematic district policy threatened her students' art time, she didn't just grumble in the staff room. She scheduled a meeting, presented clear, reasoned alternatives, and stood her ground. She won. Mrs. Hollingsworth had championed her, a proud glint in her eye. You found your voice, Samara. Don't you ever lower it again. Her social world contracted, then deepened. The friends who'd rallied around her, Tanisha, Ebony, a few others, formed a tighter, more authentic circle. They talked about real things, fears, ambitions, the complex math of happiness. There were no more performances. Her parents, while still worried, saw the strength in their daughter and shifted from protectors to proud supporters. Pops took to calling her General, a nickname that made her roll her eyes but secretly pleased her. Yet the nights were sometimes long. The scar of betrayal could throb in the quiet darkness. Trust felt like a foreign language she had to relearn from scratch. She went on a few dates set up by well-meaning friends, but found herself analyzing every word, every gesture for hidden motives. It was exhausting. She decided to press pause, to let the idea of romance settle into a distant, low-priority corner of her life. For now, building a life that felt robust and joyful on its own was romance enough. One Saturday in late April, with spring finally wrestling winter into submission, she was volunteering at a community cleanup day in a local park. She was hauling a bag of collected litter towards a dumpster when a voice called out, "Need a hand with that?" She turned, expecting to see one of the other volunteers. Instead, she saw a man around her age, holding a sketchpad and a charcoal pencil. He had been sitting on a nearby bench, capturing the scene of volunteers and budding trees. "I'm okay, thanks," she said, hefting the bag. "Unless you're offering to carry my artistic burden instead," she nodded at his sketchpad. He smiled, a warm, easy expression that reached his eyes. They were a kind, observant brown. "Touché," he said. "I'm Elijah, not sketching, just documenting the civic spirit." He gestured to the park. "It's a good scene." "Samara," she said, "and it is. Better than seeing it covered in trash." There was a pause, not awkward, but of simple mutual appraisal. He wasn't aggressively handsome like Jovon. His appeal was in a thoughtful demeanor, in the smudge of charcoal on his thumb. "What do you document when there isn't a cleanup day?" she asked. "Architecture, mostly. I'm a preservationist with the Historical Society. Today I was supposed to be drawing the old bandstand's ironwork, but the people here were more interesting." They talked for 20 minutes right there by the dumpster about forgotten city landmarks, the importance of green spaces, and the stubbornness of litter. It was easy, natural. He asked for no personal details, made no flirtatious overtures. When the volunteer coordinator called everyone for a group photo, he asked, "Mind if I sketch you in, as part of the scene?" She agreed, and it felt harmless, even flattering in a purely artistic way. She didn't think much of it until a week later when she was visiting a small exhibit on local architectural history at the library. There, displayed among sketches of gabled roofs and stone facades, was a beautifully rendered charcoal drawing. It showed the park from the perspective of the bench. In the foreground, a woman was lifting a heavy bag of trash, her face turned in profile, showing determination and a hint of a smile. The caption read, "Stewardship, Spring Cleanup, Washington Park." It was her. Her heart did a funny little flip. She stood there, staring at her own captured image, feeling seen in a way that was utterly devoid of agenda. He had drawn her strength, not her utility. As she studied the drawing, she sensed someone beside her. It was Elijah. "You found it," he said, his voice low. "You drew me." "I drew the moment," he corrected gently. "You were the best part of it." He looked genuinely nervous. "I hope that's okay. I should have asked before submitting it." "It's more than okay," Samara said, and she meant it. "It's really beautiful. Thank you." They went for coffee that afternoon. The conversation flowed as easily as it had in the park. He spoke of his work with a passion that mirrored her own for teaching. He listened intently, asked thoughtful questions. He mentioned a past long-term relationship that had ended amicably over diverging life paths. There was no rush, no intense pressure. It felt like the beginning of a conversation, not a sales pitch. Over the following weeks, they saw each other sporadically, a walk through a historic district, a visit to an art house film, sharing a coffee after work. Samara proceeded with a conscious, deliberate caution she had never possessed before. She told Tanisha about him, showed her the drawing.
"He seems normal," Tanisha said, scrutinizing a photo. "In a very good way, like emotionally available normal." "It's unnerving," Samara admitted with a laugh. "Get used to it, honey. You deserve unnervingly normal." She was honest with Elijah about her past, not the first time they went out, but when it felt like they were stepping towards something real. One evening, sitting on a bench by the river, she told him the condensed version: a quick marriage, a brutal betrayal, a public unraveling. She didn't go into the sordid details of the recording, but she didn't shy away from the truth of her pain and her subsequent transformation. He listened quietly, his gaze on the flowing water. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. "Thank you for trusting me with that," he said finally. "I can't imagine what that was like. All I can say is, the person you're describing, the one who was deceived, she doesn't seem much like the woman sitting here with me now." "She isn't," Samara said softly. "That's the point." He turned to her then, his expression earnest. "I like the woman sitting here with me now. A lot. And I'm in no hurry. We have all the time in the world to just be." It was the perfect thing to say. It didn't dismiss her history, nor did it make grandiose promises about the future. It simply honored the present. And for the first time since everything had shattered, Samara felt a flicker of possibility that wasn't terrifying, but gentle and warm. Meanwhile, life continued its steady rhythm. She celebrated the end of the school year with her students, proud of their growth and her own. She had dinner with her parents weekly, and the conversations were lighter, filled with plans for a summer garden and her father's new hobby of birdwatching. The apartment was no longer just a sanctuary from pain. It was a lively home where she hosted game nights with friends, where her pottery creations, however amateur, had pride of place on the shelves. One evening in early summer, as she was grading final projects, her phone buzzed. It was a number she didn't recognize, but with a local area code. She answered cautiously. "Hello?" "It's Samara. It's Otis Sterling, from the Velvet Garden." The manager's voice was familiar, stirring a complex mix of old anxiety and enduring gratitude. "Mr. Sterling, hello. Is everything all right?" "Oh, yes, everything's fine. More than fine, actually. I hope it's not an intrusion. I wanted to share some news with you. I felt you, of all people, should know." Samara's mind raced. Had something happened to Jovon, Lenise? "Of course. What is it?" He took a deep breath. "I've sold the restaurant. Well, I'm in the final stages. A lovely couple. They want to keep it as a family spot, maybe expand the menu. They have a little girl." His voice was thick with emotion. "The thing is, Samara, the money from the sale, it's enough. It's enough to finally bring my daughter and grandson here from out west. She's been struggling, and I've wanted to help for so long. But the restaurant always ate
every penny. After what happened with you, it put things in perspective. Life is too short for someday. So, I'm making the leap. Tears pricked Samara's eyes. Mr. Sterling, Otis, that's wonderful news. I'm so happy for you. I wouldn't have had the courage without that whole situation, he admitted. Watching you find your strength, it reminded me I had to find mine too. Not in the same way, but, So, thank you. I know it was a horrible time for you, but some good came out of it. For me, at least. They talked for a few more minutes, warm and friendly. When she hung up, Samara sat in the quiet of her living room, overwhelmed by a profound sense of closure. The velvet garden, the site of her deepest humiliation and her fiercest victory, was passing into new hands. The manager, an accidental guardian angel, was moving on to his own happier chapter. The universe, it seemed, was tidying up. A few days later, Elijah asked her to meet him at the Historical Society after hours. He had a key. The grand old building was quiet, the halls echoing with the whispers of the past. He led her to a reading room where a single file folder lay on a large oak table under a pool of light from a green-shaded lamp. I was doing some research for a project, he said, uncharacteristically fidgety, and I found this. It's not about architecture, not really. He opened the folder. Inside were photocopied pages from old city directories and newspaper social columns from the 1950s. He pointed to a name, Eleanor Hayes, her grandmother. You looked up my grandmother? Samara asked, touched and bewildered. I was curious about the building your apartment is in. It's a great example of post-war brickwork. Then I saw the name Hayes on the old ownership records. He showed her a faded article from a local paper. It was a brief piece about a community award given to Eleanor Hayes for her volunteer work organizing literacy programs for returning veterans. There was a small, grainy photo of a young woman who bore a striking resemblance to Samara, holding a certificate and smiling shyly. She was an accountant, you said, but she was also this, Elijah said softly. She built a life of quiet service and stability. She saved and bought that apartment not just as a property, but as a foundation. For her future, for your future. He looked at Samara, his eyes soft. I'm falling in love with you, Samara. With the teacher who fights for her kids, with the woman who rebuilt her life with such grace, with the granddaughter of Eleanor Hayes, who knows the value of a solid foundation. I'm in no hurry, he repeated his earlier promise. I just needed you to know what I see. He wasn't offering her a fairy tale. He was offering her a partnership, a mutual recognition of strength and history. Samara looked from her grandmother's faded photo to the man standing before her, who had taken the time to understand the roots of the woman she had become. The last of the icy shards that had been lingering around her heart since the supply room footage melted away, not in a dramatic thaw, but in a gentle, steady drip, replaced by a radiating warmth.
She didn't say, "I love you" back. Not yet. The words were too precious, and her trust, while growing, was still a careful, tender plant. Instead, she walked around the table, took his hands in hers, and kissed him. It was a kiss of profound gratitude, of burgeoning hope, of a future that was no longer something to be feared, but something to be built, slowly and well, on a foundation that had already withstood the storm. Later, as they walked out of the Historical Society into the balmy summer night, Samara felt a profound sense of peace. The twists of fate had been violent and cruel, but they had led her here, to a self she respected, to a love that felt earned and real, to an understanding of her own lineage that filled her with pride. She had not just survived the plot against her, she had transcended it, weaving its dark threads into the fabric of a life that was now, unequivocally and triumphantly, her own. The story wasn't about the betrayal anymore. It was about everything that came after. And as she laced her fingers with Elijah under the star-dusted sky, she knew the next chapter was hers to write, one deliberate, beautiful word at a time.
The story now felt like a settled book on a shelf, a definitive volume, its lessons learned, its conflicts resolved. The summer unfurled in a golden, unhurried rhythm. With school out, Samara's days were her own. She spent mornings in the community garden plot she'd adopted, her hands in the warm soil, nurturing tomatoes and basil. She found a strange, profound peace in the simple, predictable needs of growing things. Elijah often joined her after work, bringing cold lemonade and an easy, quiet companionship. They talked about everything and nothing: the stubbornness of weeds, the novel he was reading, her plans for a new literacy corner in her classroom come fall. The specter of her past marriage never loomed between them. It was simply a part of her topography, a mountain she had climbed and now viewed from a peaceful valley. One afternoon, while sorting through a box of her grandmother's old papers she'd stored in the hall closet, she found a thin, leather-bound journal tucked beneath bank statements and tax returns. The pages were filled not with personal musings, but with meticulous financial notes, garden planting schedules, and lists of books read. But on the inside back cover, in her grandmother's precise cursive, was a single, standalone line: "A woman's peace is her own creation. No one can grant it, and no one can take it away unless she hands them the keys." Samara sat on the floor of her sun-drenched living room, the journal in her lap, tears welling up. It felt like a direct message across time. Her grandmother, the pragmatic accountant, had understood the fundamental algebra of a life. The apartment was the sum, but the peace was the work. Samara had nearly handed Jovon the keys, believing him to be a co-architect of her happiness. His betrayal had forced her to change the locks, not just on her door, but on her very soul. Now she was the sole keeper, and the peace she was building was sturdier than any fleeting joy he had pretended to offer. She showed the line to Elijah that evening. He read it slowly, his finger tracing the faded ink. "She was a wise woman," he said, his voice full of respect. "And you're her living proof." He didn't try to insert himself into the equation, to claim any role in her peace. That understanding was his greatest gift to her. As July melted into August, the city buzzed with a local festival. The Historical Society had a booth showcasing vanishing cityscapes, and Elijah's drawings, including the one of Samara in the park, were on display. Tanisha dragged her to see it, beaming with proprietary pride. Standing there watching strangers admire the sketch, Samara felt a detachment from the woman in the drawing. She was both her and not her, a captured moment of a self still in transition. The real woman, the one standing here now, felt more solid, more integrated. It was at the festival, amidst the smell of fried dough and the sound of brass band music, that she saw Marcus, Jovon's old friend from the auto shop. He was with his girlfriend, holding a giant stuffed toy. His eyes met Samara's, and he faltered, a flush of awkwardness rising on his neck. Samara gave him a small, polite nod and made to move past, but he excused himself from his girlfriend and stepped towards her. "Samara, hey," he said, shoving his hands in his pockets. "You look good." "Thank you, Marcus. I am good." Her tone was neutral, not inviting conversation, but not hostile either. I felt like I never really apologized," he blurted out, "for being his friend, for not seeing it. When you played that video, man," he shook his head, looking genuinely pained. "I grew up with him. I thought I knew him. It messed me up for a while, questioning my own judgment." Samara considered him. His discomfort was palpable, and it wasn't her job to soothe it, but she also saw no malice in him. "You don't owe me an apology, Marcus. You were his friend, not mine, but I appreciate you saying that." He nodded, grateful. "He's in Riverton now, works at a dealership. I heard he and that woman, Lenice, didn't last a month. Turns out when there's no apartment to steal and no one to fool, they didn't have much to talk about." He delivered the news not as gossip, but as a grim postscript. Samara felt nothing. No schadenfreude, no pity. It was simply data. The plot required a villain and a victim. Without her in the role of the victim, their story had no structure and collapsed. "I hope he finds a way to be a better person," she said, and she found she meant it. Not for his sake, but for the sake of anyone else he might encounter. It was a statement of profound indifference, the ultimate sign that he held no space in her world. Marcus looked at her with something akin to awe. "You're something else, you know that." He gave her another awkward nod and retreated back to his girlfriend. Tanisha was watching, a smirk on her face. "Grace under fire, General," Tanisha said, looping her arm through Samara's. "Now, come on. I require funnel cake." The encounter was the last loose thread. It snipped cleanly, leaving no frayed edges. The past was officially, completely past. The night before the new school year began, Elijah came over for dinner. They cooked together in her kitchen, a comfortable dance of chopping and stirring. As they ate on her small balcony overlooking the twilight-drenched street, he placed a small, wrapped box beside her plate. "It's not a ring," he quickly said, a smile in his eyes. "I know we're not there. It's a bookmark." Intrigued, she opened it. Inside was not a bookmark, but a slender, elegant keychain. Hanging from it was a tiny, perfect silver skeleton key, beautifully crafted. Attached to the ring was a small tag with an inscription, "For the keeper of the keys."
Her breath caught. It was a tribute, a recognition, a symbol that honored her journey without trying to steer it. It acknowledged the fortress she had rebuilt and celebrated her sovereignty over it. "Elijah, it's perfect." "I saw it and thought of you, and your grandmother's words," he said. "I wanted you to have a tangible reminder, not that you need one." She held the cool metal in her palm, its weight both delicate and significant. It was a key that opened no physical lock, but which symbolized the most important one of all. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "for seeing me, for not trying to have a copy made." He laughed, and the sound was warm in the gathering dark. "I wouldn't dare." Later, as they cleaned up, the conversation turned to the future in a concrete way for the first time. He mentioned an old, slightly run-down but beautiful house near the historical district that was going up for sale, a preservation project that made his eyes light up. She talked about wanting to pursue a master's degree in educational leadership, a dream she'd shelved during her marriage. They spoke not as people making plans with each other, but as two individuals sharing their separate dreams, seeing where the blueprints might harmoniously overlap. There was no urgency, only possibility. When he left that night with a soft, lingering kiss at her door, Samara stood for a moment in her quiet hallway. She ran her thumb over the tiny skeleton key on her new keychain. She looked around at the home she had reclaimed, filled with her books, her pottery, her grandmother's steadfast presence in the very walls. She thought of her classroom, waiting for 25 new, curious minds. She thought of her parents, her friends, the life she had woven from the broken threads. She was not just okay, she was thriving. The betrayal had been a forest fire, scorching everything in its path. But in the cleared, fertile ground it left behind, she had planted a new, more resilient garden. It wasn't the same as before. It was hardier, more diverse, and deeply, authentically hers. She walked to the living room window, looking out at the city lights glittering like scattered stars. The twists of fate channel narration that had once framed her agony felt like a distant, melodramatic echo. Her life was no longer a gripping story for others' consumption. It was her reality, messy, beautiful, quiet, and strong. Samara Hayes was no longer a wife, a victim, or a plot point in someone else's scheme. She was a teacher, a daughter, a friend, a gardener, a woman thoughtfully falling in love. She was the keeper of her own keys, the author of her own peace.
And as she turned off the light and headed to bed, ready for the fresh start of a new school year dawn, she knew with absolute certainty that the best chapters were not behind her in a tale of revenge, but ahead of her, in the simple, magnificent story of a life fully and finally her own.